one of the bits in the news that you're probably not hearing about, you're probably being impacted by it though, is insurance renewals. And I've talked about this before. I'm going to talk about it again because we continue to get the insurance renewals coming in from our clients. They're asking a lot, and most companies don't know what these things are. They're asking their IT providers, and sometimes the IT provider might actually have an answer for it, and sometimes they tell you they don't have an answer for it. It's really weeding out a lot of the smaller IT providers that struggle to have multiple solutions to solve all these security requirements by the insurance brokers and the banks and lending institutions. So one of my clients today sent this over a couple of days ago, actually, and I just got time today. I got through it, and it was from their insurance broker. And it's a cyber and professional lines group through this insurance carrier. And they sent it to me to help fill it out. And so some of the things on this are a bit of a surprise because the client is not in healthcare. They're not Department of Defense. They are a small business that doesn't really work with mission critical software and services. So what I'm getting to on that is that the insurance companies are sending the same document to everyone, whether you know what it is or not. And as you read through this, you're having to say yes or no. You have to be really careful and know what you're saying yes to or no to, because if you don't have these things in place, you're paying for a policy that is not going to pay out should you have a ransomware event or an attack or stolen data or breach or whatever. So I'm going to go through this document, which is actually this insurance broker has done a very good job on this. So oftentimes when I see these documents, it looks like they asked someone who kind of knew what they were talking about, and then someone else maybe wrote it down and kind of knew maybe a little bit about what they were talking about, and then that was interpreted through like a decoder ring, and then someone else like in 8th grade wrote it down how they heard it written on their back in the playground or something. So usually, in other words, it just doesn't make a lot of sense, the things people are asking for. So this one's actually pretty good. I'm not going to share my screen because I don't want to, say who the insurance broker is because it could come off negative or anything. So I'm just going to talk about it. So a couple of things. So first, it talks about email security, which is one of the more important controls you can have in your organization for security. And it asks the first thing: do you tag external emails to alert employees that the message originated from outside the organization? That's a really great thing to do because that is how you get spoofing done. Someone will send an email purporting to be from someone like a CFO saying, would you please go pick up 20 gift cards from Walmart and send them to this address or whatever. Just somehow they try to pretend to be someone in your organization, sending it to their finance department or whatever. And then the employee falls for it, does what they've been asked to do because they're a loyal employee and they do what they're told and they don't question it. And now the employee is in trouble and the owner is mad and lots of money left the organization and so on. But if you tag each email from outside the organization, because when those things happen, they usually happen from outside the organization. It's not that your organization's been compromised. It's someone from the outside is pretending to be someone inside your organization. So they send an email to, say, your finance director or your CFO asking to transfer funds. Now, hopefully a CFO or a finance director wouldn't fall for this, but maybe a low-level clerk might. And they ask them to transfer funds. If on the header of that email, it says in bold letters with a red background that this email originated from outside your organization, then the person who receives that should have the wherewithal to go, that is not my boss. They would not be sending me an email from outside my organization. This is fraudulent. I'm going to block this or let my IT department know. So that is the first thing they ask for. And it's a great, super simple, low cost, actually really no cost way to protect your organization. Do you screen emails for potentially malicious attachments and links? So we call that URL rewrite. So when someone sends you a URL in an email, it could be a malicious URL going to a website, right? A web URL. And so when you screen those, we use a software from a company called Proofpoint. And what it does is it rewrites that URL. So you go to Proofpoint before you actually go to the website that the URL goes to. And then Proofpoint analyzes it and makes sure that it's safe, and then we'll send you on or block you from being able to go there. Excellent protection. The next one is what we call attachment detonation, and they're calling it pre-screen emails for potentially malicious attachments. But they go on down here and they say, if yes, you have the capability to automatically detonate and evaluate attachments in a sandbox to determine if they are malicious prior to delivery to the end user. So again, with Proofpoint, when an attachment comes in, so someone might send you an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document. Both of those have the ability to have macros in them, which macros, think of it just like you can make a malicious application that does something on your computer. So when they detonate those, in other words, they execute them, make them run in a sandbox outside of your organization before they release them to you, then anything that's malicious in that that attachment is going to try to do something. And the company, that Proofpoint that we use, is going to analyze that and then prevent that from coming through. Awesome protection. Again, these are some really good protections for your organization. So next thing is, have you implemented any of the following to protect against phishing messages? Sender Policy Framework, also called SPF, Domain Keys Identified Mail, DKIM, also called DKIM, Domain-Based Message Authentication Reporting and Conformance, DMARC, or none of the above. Most companies will have an SPF record, because a while back, a lot of organizations started blocking mail if it didn't have an SPF, but we're still seeing a lot of companies don't have DMARC or DKIM set up. That should be set up for everyone. There's no cost. It just has to be set up. It's a configuration. It maybe takes 30 minutes to an hour to get done in your environment, and it will protect you from a lot of malicious email and protect others from receiving malicious email from you if they are blocking. So someone purporting to be from your company can be blocked before they've gone through. So it does a lot of good protections. Can your users access email through a web application or a non-corporate device? You know, a lot of organizations will say, no, they can't, because they know they get email on their workstation at work. That is a false assumption. If you're using Office 365 or even Google Mail, unless you go in and explicitly deny the ability, especially, I don't know about Google Mail a whole lot, but with Office 365, unless you explicitly deny access to the webmail application or to be able to use mail on mobile devices, the users can set that up. And most organizations, we don't explicitly deny that unless the organization asks us to. So do not assume just because you don't know it's being done that it cannot be done. Employees will oftentimes go in on their personal device and they'll set up their work email and they'll have access to it. And then they get terminated or quit and they still have access to that email unless you go in and wipe it. So very important that you understand, is that policy in place? Do not assume something, especially when it comes to technology, because that is going to get you killed and it's going to get you in trouble. Do you use Office 365 in your organization? Yes or no? Now, they don't care if you use it. In fact, they're probably pretty happy if you are, because there's some really good controls in Office 365 versus some of the other solutions out there, like just using PopMail from an ISP or from your web host like HostGator or someone like that. You're using like a free email client. Well, you know, Microsoft has a little bit of filtering that's default and native into their solution. So you're getting a little bit more value there. And then if you say, yes, you use Office 365, it says, do you use the Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection add-on? It's a great add-on. It's very good. We don't use it ourselves because we primarily deploy Proofpoint, although I think we may have one customer on it. I have nothing against it, but we standardized on Proofpoint and it does a great job. And until we start having problems, we're not going to switch. But you would have to say no if you use Proofpoint here, but then you need to explain it later and say, look, we have something equally as good or better from this other company that we do to accomplish that. So even though I would put no here, I would explain it in the additional comments section underneath there, or I would write it out somewhere, but I want them to know. All right. Do you use a cloud provider to store data or host applications? If your servers are hosted at a remote site, that is considered cloud. It is not on-prem. All the cloud is servers and infrastructure that's not in your company, that's not in your complete control. So what they typically mean by this would be like OneDrive, SharePoint, Dropbox, things like that. But they also mean if your servers are hosted on Amazon AWS and things like that. So if you say no, but you're using OneDrive, well, you're wrong. You're using a cloud hosting provider. If you use SharePoint, and both those come free with Office 365. So if you don't think you're using them, but you have Office 365, I would be willing to bet that you have an employee that is using them and you just don't know it. Because if they're not configured and they're not set up and they're not restricted, then you have no knowledge of what is or isn't being used in your organization. And that's another reason why when you have Office 365, it's not as simple as just turning it on and saying, everyone gets email, everyone gets Outlook, Office, Excel, Word, all that on their computers. You actually need to go in and make sure that you have allowed access to OneDrive and SharePoint or disallowed it. It's allowed by default because Microsoft wants people using those tools, right? So you have to actually have someone who knows what they're doing go in and set restrictions. For instance, with SharePoint and OneDrive, if you don't set any restrictions, people can go in there and create files with company protected information on it, proprietary, everything you don't want anyone else to know about, and they can turn around and share that to someone else. I have received, I don't know, probably a couple of dozen times since OneDrive and SharePoint's been out, where my clients have accidentally shared to me because they go into their Outlook, they autocomplete to my email address instead of an internal employee, and then they would share information to me on accident through email. So you can deny the ability for people to share outside your organization, and it would prevent that from happening. So It's not enough to just say, hey, we have Office 365, everyone gets SharePoint, OneDrive, hooray, we can now share things globally. You got to have someone that's managing that and restricting access and monitoring it to make sure that things don't change, because Microsoft might release an update. It changes how that stuff works, much like Facebook has done. If any of you have used Facebook, I'm an older person, as my kids would say, they call me an old. And so I used Facebook, and that's how I talk to my friends and family and stuff on social media. And in Facebook, they would constantly change their rules where you'd have to go and know that, oh, this changed. Now I've got public information that was private before. So keep that in mind. Do you use MFA? Now, in this thing, it doesn't really even explain what MFA is. MFA is multi-factor authentication. So when you log into your computer, the first form of authentication typically is a login and password. So you go to login and password. The second form of authentication, a multi-factor authentication. So the first factor is login and password. The second factor is something else. So typically that is going to be a PIN or an app push to your phone that you can authorize to get in, or it could be biometric. It could be your face being scanned with like Microsoft's Hello app using the camera on your computer to log in, but it's some other factor of authentication in your system. So if you have a login and password, that is not multi-factor authentication. That is just a single factor authentication. So let's see, do you use MFA to secure all remote access to your network, including any remote desktop protocol, RDP, also known as RDP connections? Well, so let's talk about MFA. MFA is one of the best security tools you can have to protect your organization. And the reason that is, your first form of authentication, your login and password, let's say you have it set up and it expires every 90 days. Hooray, it expires every 90 days. But your employee's probably going to write that down on a sticky note. They're probably going to reuse it for the other websites they log into, like LinkedIn or Tinder or whatever, right? They're going to reuse that password because people have to remember too many passwords, right? So they're going to use it somewhere, or they're going to just change one number, one letter. Well, when that third-party website gets compromised and that password is in the hands of someone who's malicious, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to see that Susie's password is Bob Dobbs #12. Well, that's interesting. I wonder if I keep trying #13, #14, and I trace it back to Susie's email address, Susie at whatever. And if I track it back, because I know the email domain, because people register on these websites with their work email address, and then they use their work password because they don't want to remember one, right? Easy to track all that back, very easy to guess what the password might be if people are just changing one number, one letter every single time their password expires, right? So multi-factor authentication helps stop that by saying the person's trying to log into your system remotely through RDP or VPN, whatever it might be. They get past that first phase and then boom, they're presented with another login that requires a PIN code. And the only way to get into that is to either be physically at the computer, have a key fob that has a 6-digit code that's generated every 60 seconds, have a push to your phone and actually have physical contact with the phone, or any of those other methods. So it's a great security tool. And that's why the insurance companies are asking for this. You're looking at anywhere from $1.50 to $5 per employee to make this happen. And there's some configuration and labor and maintenance that goes into it. And it's inconvenient. Your people won't like it. They just want to log in. They didn't like having passwords back when Windows 95 came out. I was in the enterprise, and I remember when everyone didn't have to have a password on any of their computers, and we started rolling out passwords. You'd think the whole building was going to burn to the ground. People did not want a password. They could not remember their password. They were going to put them on sticky notes on their monitors. And we had a big uproar in a large Fortune 500 company over that. So it's just the next iteration, and it's not fun. It's because we live in a fallen world, and we've got to deal with it. All right. Do you use a next generation antivirus? So there's next generation antivirus is just, everyone's going to claim they're a next generation antivirus. And this, they call it an NGAV, next generation antivirus. Woo, sounds fancy. Really, everyone's going to say they're a next generation antivirus. And so antivirus is kind of old school these days. So endpoint detection response is really where it's at. There's 3 primary versions of endpoint detection response: EDR, MDR, and XDR, and they each do a little bit different thing. They each function a little bit different with how they're managed. Some are AI driven. Some are have a security operations center with people behind it that are watching to see if things are changing. Some integrate into multiple different types of systems in your network to be able to report on a wider breadth of attack and so on. But Webroot WebRoot's one that we use as a base antivirus. It's very generic. It's very inexpensive. It's not a bad product. It does a pretty good job, but it's not enough. You really need to have that EDR, MDR, XDR. Well, that is the next question. Do you use an endpoint detection and response, also known as an EDR tool that includes centralized monitoring and logging of all endpoint activity across your enterprise? If yes, please select your EDR provider. If other, please provide the name of your EDR provider. So it's not enough to just say you have one. They want to know who you have and that it's in place and working and so on. Do you use MFA to protect access to privileged user accounts? Well, we already had one MFA question. Now we got another one. We go a little farther down. So what does that mean? Well, a good example of that is we're an outsourced IT service provider for our clients. And we realized quite a while back that if anything was to happen to us, our customers would be in deep trouble, because if we got compromised, God forbid, then the attackers that get us can go after our customers using our accounts. So what we did is we went in and enabled multi-factor authentication for all active accounts that are administrative for all of our clients, for us to gain access to our clients' infrastructure. So if I have a technician that needs to log into your server, first, there's a huge vetting process of how we get those technicians to be able to be capable and knowledgeable and skilled to do that. And then second, when they go to log in, they have to have a dedicated account that they log in with a password, complex username, and then we have multi-factor authentication tied to that as well. So second form authentication, both of those have logging. The logging for logging into the server is located on the server itself. It's also located on a remote control software that is immutable. In other words, it cannot be edited or changed. And then third place is in the multi-factor authentication software that we use that stores that up in the cloud and says when they logged in, what they logged into, and what, basically that kind of stuff. So what this means is if you manage your own IT, then your own IT team at minimum should have multi-factor authentication turned on for themselves to access your infrastructure. Now, I'm not saying your IT team would do this, and I'm not saying your IT support provider would do this, but I have seen where lots of security controls are rolled out for the organization, but then the IT team is like, we're not going to apply it to ourselves because we know what we're doing. Not good. I've seen that enough times to know that that does happen. It's not healthy. It's not good for the organization in any stretch of the imagination. So make sure that your IT team is following the same rules that they're implementing for everyone else. Do you manage privileged access using privileged account management software? We also call that PAM, privileged account management. So what that means is when someone needs to do something at an elevated level, they have to request permission, and you can have software that then pings your IT department, pings your third-party provider, lets them know that your employee is trying to do something at an elevated level, and it can be approved or declined through that process, and it's documented. It's a really great solution. That is one that I think your insurance brokers are going to start requiring everywhere. The alternative to that is you can do one of two things. One is you can give everyone administrative rights, and they can install anything they want. Historically, that's the way most IT's been done. You've got an employee, they have a laptop, they need to travel, they may need to install printers and whatever, and it may be an executive. So you just go, you know what, you're a local administrator, do what you want. Well, those are the people most likely to get attacked. Therefore, they need to be the ones that have the highest degree of security. But historically, they're the ones that, no, I don't want all that. I just want to be able to do what I want to do and give me all those rights. Well, you'd have to say, no, you don't have this if you don't have your execs with privileged access management. Now, here's what happened. If you give them administrative rights, then if someone gets on that computer, they run as that user and they have full administrative rights of that computer. They can get and download stuff, install software, whatever they want to do. The alternative to that is you don't make them an administrator. They can't do anything. They got to call your IT department, call your third-party IT company. That person has to remote in, give them rights on their computer to do that one function or whatever temporarily, or install something for them. That's it. There's not really a lot of granular control there. It's just going to take interaction from someone else who is administrator. Well, that C-level guy does not like that. He's like, why do I have to call someone to get something done? I'm an executive. They get really irate. So the third way to do that is to go in and use a privileged access management system. The executive is traveling. He needs to install a printer for a conference or whatever it might be. It dings the IT department. IT department sees it's the executive. It lets them know what is he trying to do. If it's something they look at it and they go, that is safe, I know that is safe, they approve it right then within 2 minutes, boom, that person is able to install and move on with their life. The alternative is it can create a ticket, and then that ticket can be authorized at a later date. You build your IT department around how responsive you want to be. We do that for our clients as well. So it works. It makes their life easy. They can do the things they need to do without being a local administrator on their computer. It may be a slight inconvenience because of the request going through a channel, but you can make it work and still accomplish what you need to for those executives. All right. Do you manage privileges? We already did that one. Do you actively monitor all administrator access for unusual behavior patterns? This is a really good one. That kind of falls in line with a SIM, a security incident event management system. And I'll be talking about that because they're going to ask about that later on. There's other ways to do that. Those solutions can get a little expensive. There's various different price points for it. Smaller companies are not going to see a lot of value in that. You really just need to have the layered security on there. SIMs are very expensive and they require more infrastructure and management. Just not really cost effective unless your organization is very high security. It's required by some regulation. And I think it's great. I think SIMs are fantastic solutions. I mean, I wish everyone had one. It's just the cost to the value it's hard to justify, and it's really hard to get customers that are smaller to buy that product. So I'm just speaking from experience. Larger enterprises, large hospitals, 500 or more endpoints and users, they really need something like that to kind of see the breadth of what's going on in their network. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. Let's see. Do you record and track all software and hardware assets deployed across your organization? If you're in any kind of regulated industry, this is really important because number one, there's regulation that requires that you do that. So if you have a laptop and you cannot account for that laptop and that laptop was used by a nurse and it has documented that it could store EPHI, which in healthcare, you assume everything has EPHI on it. If you're assuming something doesn't have EPHI, you're probably wrong, because I've done enough scans on hospital networks to find out that almost every single computer in a hospital network, shy of thin clients, will have EPHI on it. So EPHI, electronic protected health information, think of it like this. You get scanned documents, they get stored on the local computer first, they may get moved somewhere else, there's still EPHI on that computer. You get you get a report that has patient records or information out of your EMR system, you download the local computer, you want to work with it in Excel and Word, it's local, it's now there. Right, so you always assume every local device has EPHI unless it's a thin client that absolutely does not have the ability to store anything locally. All right. See, that was, do you record and track all software and hardware? So you really want to track every asset you have. If that computer is not something that you can report on and you don't have it, you don't know where it went, you're going to get in trouble eventually. Probably only when you get an audit. You're probably only going to get an audit if you have an incident. Now, you have to report your incidents to the Office of Civil Rights. Laptop gets stolen out of a doctor's back seat, smash and grab that he left it on his back seat at a parking garage. Someone walked by, saw it, smashed his window out, took his laptop. You have to report that. Now, you don't have to report it if it's encrypted. That's a safe harbor. It's a HIPAA safe harbor. So lots of little pieces of this go into this whole thing. I'm not going to go into that in any more detail because I've probably gone too far already. Do non-IT users have local administrator rights on their laptops? See, it's asking the same question. So it asked about privileged access management earlier. Now it's asking the same question in a different way. Because if you have privileged access management, but you're also saying that your local users have administrative rights, and they're going to go, that doesn't jive. Something's not right. Do you have any end of life or end of support software? So right now, Server 2008 is expired by a couple of years. If you have a Server 2008 server in your environment, you're wrong. They're going to be all over you like a rat on a Cheeto. Same with Windows 7. You got to get rid of those devices. If you have any hardware that's end of life, you need to get rid of that as well. End of life is something that is no longer supported. A no longer supported operating system, Windows 7, Server 2008, does not receive critical security updates. But they do continue to publish all the vulnerabilities in that operating system so that attackers can easily identify, oh, they've got a Server 2008. I know I can do some damage to that. So you need to get rid of that stuff, get it upgraded. Do you use a protective DNS service? So DNS service is think of it like content filtering. Back in the day when content filtering first came out, it was originally introduced as a way to protect organizations from lazy employees going and surfing everywhere. When high-speed internet first came out, everyone that worked in an organization that got high-speed internet, they spent half their day on eBay or MySpace back in the day because their internet was so much faster than the dial-up they had at home. So they came out with content filtering to be able to block all those things from people being able to go there, to go to all these websites and waste all this time that could be better spent doing productive things. Well, in this day and age, that's really not a big deal. You've got your cell phone. Employees still may squander time on pages they shouldn't be on their phone or whatever. But That's not really the big thing now. What we want to do is we want to block malicious websites. We don't want people to be able to get to a website even on accident or on purpose that they shouldn't be into, including things like, people Googling things about violence. I mean, there's liability for your whole organization if you have an employee that's going out learning how to make bombs or looking at pornography and so on. So that is a good thing to have on your network. It also protects your organization as a second layer of protection against, say, email-borne threats. So let's say you've got your email, a URL comes in through your email. You've got proof point, like some kind of filtering thing that's rewritten the URL. You click on it. Well, proof point maybe missed that was malicious, just for whatever reason. Well, now your DNS filtering solution is going to say, oh, wait, no, I think that's malicious and won't let you go. So it's another layer. Now that can be a real irritation too, because if you know it's legitimate and it's a false positive, now you got to have someone that goes and whitelisted on 2 different places, and they may not know there's 2 places to whitelist it in. So it can be irritating, but that's security these days. Until we can come up with better solutions, it's going to be frustrating for everyone, and I hate it. It shouldn't be that way, but it is what it is. So they talk about a security. Do you utilize a security information in event management system? So that's a SIEM, SIEM. Again, that's a log. Think of it as a big log aggregator. It has some AI in it that goes and correlates logs for all your systems. So if something comes into your firewall and it touches this computer and it's doing something wonky, your SIEM's going to look at it and say, I saw you come in the firewall. I saw you do this wonky thing over here on this server. And then I saw you do something wonky on this workstation. And I'm recording all those logs of everything you touched. So now, once I realize that you're ransomware and you're trying to attack my network, I'm trying to shut you down. Maybe my EDR, my endpoint detection response, shut it down. I can go back to my SIEM and I can track back everywhere it touched, and I can clean all those devices up without having to just go, okay, I got it where it ended, but I don't know everything it touched. And then it just shows up again and again and again. So your SIEM is going to help you identify, isolate, and target just the places where an attack came in. And it's great at doing that. And it saves your forensics team a great amount of time when you have that. But it is not cheap. It's expensive. We use one of the least expensive ones out, and you're still looking at probably anywhere from, if you want to have 90 days of retention for your logs, you're looking at probably about $30 per user per month. Great tool. I wish it was less expensive, but it is what it is. And there's some new companies coming out. I'm hoping that price will get down, especially with inflation. Do you utilize Security Operations Center? So a SOC, SOC, Security Operations Center. When you buy software like a SIEM or an EDR, there's options to have a third-party Security Operations Center behind that monitors it, reacts to events, and so on. In a lot of ways, we're a SOC in a lot of ways, but we're not. We don't sell ourselves as a SOC. But what we do is when our EDR alerts on a infection that could happen, or our SIEM does, it will automatically trigger a paging system for all of our technicians. So we have an on-call rotation that goes, and so it will trigger, they'll get notified, and they will immediately launch into action to try to get that resolved if it becomes a problem. Now, we've not, in the last 6 years, have not had an attack that has ever triggered that pager that got through all of our defenses we put in for our clients. So we haven't had that happen, but we do have the policies and procedures in place to do it. But we don't call ourselves a SOC. A SOC typically is, in all truth, a SOC typically is a team of 50 to 100 people in a in a remote country that just sit and monitor logs all day long, and they're creating scripts. So certain things happen, they can see them, react to them, and they get actively involved, and they're going to call your IT team and say, this is what's going on. Work with your IT team to resolve it using their tools and their expertise. Typically, those people are very skilled at one thing, and that is looking at screens all day long and reacting to certain things that happen on those screens. But your IT team is not replaced by them, because these people that are looking at those screens are just looking at logs and trying to correlate. They don't know what your infrastructure is. They just know where the incident came in, what it's touched. They start to try to pull all that together, but your IT team is going to go in and actually do the work, the hard, heavy lifting to get things taken care of. All right. And it talks about backup and recovery. There's a few things I've skipped over here too. Backup and recovery, they want to know, how frequently do you run backups? Do you run them daily, weekly, monthly? Estimated amount of time it will take to restore essential functions in the event of a widespread malware or ransomware attack within your network. This is a really big deal. So a lot of companies that we've ran into over the years, where we'll get called in after a ransomware incident, their backups get wiped out 9 times out of 10 because they do their backups on site. and maybe they do them offsite, but it's the same authentication mechanism. So the attacker just goes and finds everywhere the backup's at, and as part of their concerted effort to destroy everything, they destroy the backup so that you can't recover and they can hold you ransom, right? So when we talk about backups and recoverability, the biggest curse of the ransomware gangs is they do what's called dwell time. So they're going to get into your system and they're going to dwell in your system for a certain amount of time while they do all their forensics to figure out how to lock your environment down. So when they finally kick off ransomware, they know they're going to get paid because you can't live without your data. They're going to infiltrate into your system. They're going to exfiltrate data out of your system, and they're going to hold you ransom. They're going to threaten to release that data if you don't pay the ransom. They're also going to hold your data and not give you anything that's encrypted unless you pay them. By encrypted, that, just think of it like this. They just basically took all your data and they stole it and they've got it in a warehouse somewhere, and you're going to have to pay them to let that data out of their warehouse. Even though it's sitting on your computers, your network, you can't touch it because it's been encrypted, and you got to have a key to decrypt that. So you have to have a key to get into that warehouse to be able to get that data. All right. So when that happens and they have that dwell time, what happens is you're doing your backups. Let's say you're doing them daily. Well, the first thing that happens when you have a ransomware incident is the company, the insurance company, comes out and they have their forensics team. They bring them out. They try to figure everything out. They're going to try to figure out how they got in, and they're going to try to point their finger at what you did wrong. And they're also trying to figure out how not to pay their claim, because their insurance companies have been beat up so bad over these claims the last few years. They were paying them all, and now they're getting really strict. So they're going to go back to this document that you're filling out saying what you do or don't have, and they're going to say, well, you said you have this, but you do not. You have this other thing, or you don't have it at all. Therefore, you're not getting paid because this could have been prevented had you had that solution you said you had in place, or that configuration, or whatever. So once the attacker's in your network, they've encrypted all your data, they've been in there, say, 45 days. Well, you've got a SIM, so you've got a security incident management system, and you're going to go in there and you're going to figure out how they came in, every device they touched, what they did while they were in there, and now you've got information to be able to recover. Well, you go to your backups and you go back to that earliest point in time of backup, and you figure out, where they're at, what they did on your network, and you're trying to purge all that data and so on. Or purge all the attack executables, the applications, things running in memory, and so on, to try to get them out of your system so that you can then recover that data onto another server. That takes a lot of time. So there's two terms we talk about, RPO and RTO: recovery point objective, recovery time objective. Recovery point objective is how much data can you afford to lose, and recovery time objective is how long can you afford to be down. Recovery point objective is what they're asking here when they say estimate the amount of time it will take to restore essential functions in the event of a widespread malware or ransomware attack within your network. We shoot for a 24-hour recovery time for data destruction. So, good example: tornado blows up your building. We have your data offsite. We also have cold spare servers. So within 24 hours, we try to have it so that we can restore all your data onto another server. That all gets blown out with ransomware, because now we have to go through with whatever forensic data we have to try to weed out and purge all of the things inside of your backups that are malicious before we can restore. Because if we restore those, and it's got all those malicious code and executables and stuff running in there, as soon as I restore that, your data is encrypted again. It's just gone. I mean, we don't want to do that because it can take hours or even days to restore data at times. So we have to go in and spend a lot of time. So your RPO, RTO under a ransomware incident dramatically increases. So you want to prevent those, because anyone that's ever had a ransomware incident, they first thing they always say is, I thought I could just restore from backups. No, because your backups are backing up all your data that's also has the ransomware incident, because the attackers got in there and they dwelled in your network and they embedded as best they could. So all your backups backing up that infrastructure is also getting all their attacks backed up with it. We can't purge those attacks when we do backups because we don't know about them until the ransomware kicks off. So be very cognizant of how backups work and how you're going to recover in that environment. That is all I've got. That's a lot. And you're going to hear me talk about this, and we'll be probably talking about this for years to come. There are some solutions coming out that are kind of slimming down some of these multiple layers that we have to put in. Ultimately, I'd like to see us get down where we have one or two solutions that really control a lot of that and do a very good job. But right now, to properly secure your environment, you're probably looking at about 6 or 7 solutions, that third-party agents and software minimum, to be able to get the layer of security that your insurance broker is asking you to have. Now, even if you don't have these, that doesn't mean your insurance carrier is going to deny you coverage. It does mean that your rates will probably go up based on not having these things, because they're looking at them going, If you don't have these things, your chance of getting ransomware is 100%. If you don't have any of these at all, it's 100%. You're going to get it eventually. Now, you may get it only on one computer, or it may not be widespread. They don't care because they know you're going to get it. And when you get it, it's the same as your building burning to the ground, and they're going to have to pay out to get that stuff done, to get all your data restored, to have a third party come in, to put in new servers. Because when ransomware happens, you can't just wipe and rebuild your infrastructure, right? You've got to keep that set aside. Forensics teams working on it, they may work on it for a week. You can't do anything because they're doing that all on that infrastructure. In the meantime, you need to be building new infrastructure to run your company on, trying to rebuild all of it from scratch or whatever you need to do. You're trying to get data that's secure or that's clean out of your old infrastructure, move it into your new infrastructure and get operational as soon as possible. But you could be looking at several weeks to several months to be operational. And you could actually be looking at several years to be fully back to where you were before the incident. We've seen right now, we've got a company that we're talking to that about a year ago, they got hit with ransomware. They are still not back where they were at the same level with the same performance a year later. So it's a mess. And that's a big company. Smaller companies probably recover, be a little more nimble, but bigger companies, a couple of hundred employees, it gets to be a big headache. So that's all I got. Again, enjoy the rest of your week. Hope that was informative. Have a great rest of your day.